let's talk about Fantastic Four, right? But I should mention, folks, that despite the title here, we're not gonna spend a lot of time on the previous films, right? So this is not gonna be another reign of the Superman, right? But I think that it helps. I think it makes sense, I should say, to talk about the previous films. Before we jump into the first steps, right? And or I should say first steps. Or sorry, the Fantastic Four first steps, right? Not to be confused with Fantastic Four, right? And the other incarnations, right? But yeah, Fantastic Four, right? Still not one of my favorite comics to come out of Marvel. I've never owned any Fantastic Four books ever in my life. But I read a few before in my life, right? I don't know. It's just the premise itself, or I should say not the premise. The characters themselves just felt way too goofy and silly, right? But I understand when it came out, it was the '60s, and where the creators were at, like Jack Kirby, R.I.P. Jack Kirby, were at the time. It was leading towards that whole psychedelic flower power era, right? So it was about just fantabulous set pieces and weird characters, all that kind of stuff, right? So that's why the characters themselves, right? Sue and well, sorry, Sue Storm, Johnny Storm, Reed Richards, and Ben Grimm. They all felt like just very weird, very unique characters, right? Like, I mean, for God's sake, right? You have a character that literally stretches, right? Like rubber. You have a character that is literally made of rock, right? You have a chick who has invisible rays and force fields, and then a dude who literally, his body, catches fire, and yet still when he comes back to normal, this his clothes are normal, right? So it's kind of weird, right? It's kind of silly, right? But yet it works, right? And it's always one of those books, right? Always one of those that properties, if you will, right? That I really admire stood the test of time, right? Even though it came out in the '60s, it's not like people like look down at them in the '70s or the '80s or even in the '90s, right? People still respected them, So and I mean, they are one of the pillars as far as Marvel media goes, right? So you would think, right, with the legacy that these characters already have, right? You'd think that we would have had just a decent, or I should say, a fitting movie for these characters, right? And boy, it took years. Well, it took years for anyone, right, to actually give these characters justice, right? So this is why I'm calling this special here the 5 steps of the Fantastic Four, right? Because to talk about first steps, boy, we had to talk about them first steps, right? So without wasting too much time, and don't worry, folks, this is not going to be in depth. Well, when it comes to the previous films, we're not going to go too in depth on these things. It's just quick thoughts on them, right? Because what I did, I don't know if you did the same thing, Ricardo, and I don't blame you if you didn't. Yeah, I sort of rewatch. Or I should say, I watched the first film, the first film incarnation of the Fantastic Four. That would be the Fantastic Four from '94, right? Never saw that show before, but the others that would be Fantastic Four of 2005, Rising Silver Surfer from 2007, and of course the dreaded Fantastic from 2016. It was. Let me see, it's 2016 or 2018. Let me see.
2050.
Yes, from 2015, right? And speaking of that, as I mentioned, 2015. This was actually my pick, my second pick for worst film of 2015, because my number one was 50 Shades of Grey. And neither one of those shows I watched in theaters. I don't know if you saw Fantastic in theaters. I did not, because I heard how bad it was. Early o'clock.
Right.
I waited to come out on digital. I watched. I was like, thank God I didn't spend money to watch that shit, right? But yeah, let me start with the movie that I never saw before, right? That would be the Fantastic Four, right? I mean, I always heard about it, of its cult status and, how it was produced by Roger Corman and how cheap it looks, right? So I just always saw like little stills of it and whatnot. I was like, I'm not gonna watch that shit, right? But in preparation for First Steps, I actually watched it up for myself, right? So forgive me if I sound like a hypocrite here, right? But here's the thing. I love cult films, right? I love when films have this sort of strange allure to them, something about them that's weird and unique, and they find an audience, right? And you watch them, you watch the films, and you enjoy them for their weirdness and whatnot, right? I know this show have a cult status around it. I know the people who give it that cult status like the film, right? They see past the goofiness of it, the silliness of it all, and they like it, right? They find it's charming and all that kind of stuff, right? And they marvel at the fact that this movie, cost $1 million US to make, right? I was watching this thing, and it just looks so cheap, so unpolished. The acting is suspect. The makeup, dude, the prosthetics that they do on that guy who played Ting is beyond laughable. It's just sort of painful to watch. The story and the changes didn't work for me at all. The depiction of Doctor Doom didn't make any sense to me at all. The character who's not the mole man, but they make a sort of a weird version of that character because I guess they didn't have all the rights of Fantastic Four, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, none of that make any sense to me, just. I was just watching this thing. I was like, this is bad, though. This is terrible. But I can understand, like, hey, if you get drunk and you watch with friends, you laugh at it, right? But I honestly cannot watch this show with a straight face and say, oh, this is so charming, and look at this. Oh, this, despite the budget, look at how this looks. I'm sorry, if you have $1 million, I don't care if your producer is Roger Corman, right? Respect to the man, RIP to him. I mean, I know he's an OG, right? I know he is legendary when it comes to low budget cinema and whatnot, right? But we're talking about a superhero movie in the mid 90s, right? I know the bar was already low at this point in time when it came to Marvel stuff, right? But oh gosh, man, don't shell out $1 million for a movie like this with the name Fantastic Four attached it there. I'm watching visual effects. Like I'm seeing the moment with the Human Torch trying to stop a laser. I'm watching this thing and it's like this shit looks like something out in the late 80s shit. What is this, right?
Looking terrible.
I am
Yeah,
looking
even for
at
the
the
time it was
yeah,
last year.
even at the time, it looks terrible. I'm watching the thing,
Yeah.
and there's this line, right, where I was laughing at it. It's so funny, but cringe, yeah? This, look at me! Ah! I was watching that back like 5 times. I was cracking up at that shit, and that was so funny, yeah? And they're playing it off like, oh no, Ben Grimm realizes he's the thing. No! Look at me! That was terrible. The stretching effects, terrible. The invisibility effects, cheap. The costume for Doctor Doom, cheap. I will say though, the actor who played him, you could tell like he was having fun with it. Like he get the gist of the story. He get like, oh, it's just some. It really feels like at the end of the day, it feels like some. It feels like a student film. It really does look and feel like a student film. And it doesn't hurt that the fact that the movie still remains bootlegged, right? Even though the version I saw, which is currently on YouTube, is a 4K version of it, right? Just basically took a
Right.
VHS tape and just basically, I don't know, we probably use AI or whatever it is and, do some color correction or whatever. Well, not some color correction, but basically, re-export it now as a 1080p or, sorry, as a 2160p thing. I don't know. Point is, it still looked like it came from a VHS tape, right? From Blockbuster. That's what it looked like, right? But yeah, I didn't care for this at all. I can understand it's called status boy, but boy, this is just like in the nether regions of superhero film in my opinion though. Like I understand status, right? I can understand people liking it for how goofy it is, right? But nah, there was no excuse for this being so poorly made, poorly written, poorly directed, and poorly acted, I must say too, right? And boy, don't even get me started on that $1 million budget. And the moment I hear $1 million it took for them to make this, I was like, nah, or they're not serious. Or they're clearly not serious. They could have done better with this, much better with this, right? And it's just started with a bigger budget. Give a bigger budget. Get your actors to give a shit. Get the director to give a shit. Instead of spending 3 weeks to work on this thing and thinking, oh, I'm just gonna get a paycheck. Woo! You know what I mean? But now, boy, this is kind of bad. This is kind of bad, right? But that's just my opinion. Just having seen this quite recently, right? Me and Ricardo, quick thoughts on the Fantastic Four from '94.
Yeah, so kind of a waste of time. You could see why they never released it officially. You got to look for that shit. It's pretty bad. That's what to talk about. It's like it's just trash.
All right, well, we should mention too around this time. Well, I didn't know about the existence of this movie, right? Because believe it or not, in the States they actually advertised this in theaters, and then people were surprised that it was pulled from theaters, right? It was because of well, the rights to the property itself, right? But that's a whole long story. You can watch videos about it. You can go on Wikipedia to read that up, right? But during that time, around '94, I believe it was, yeah, we saw the Fantastic Four cartoon, which I thought wasn't bad. I was
Right.
still on the high of the Fox Kids Spider-Man series, so and of
Right.
course X-Men, right? So like I was looking to those two when it came to like top quality Marvel stuff, right? So when I saw stuff like Fantastic Four and Iron Man and even Silver Surfer, I was like, eh, they're good, but they know Spider-Man, they know X-Men, they're not at that level, Dread, right? But I had fun with Fantastic Four, right? I actually dug the team song that they used for the first season. It's silly and goofy AF, but I like it and it stays with you. I remember they actually redid the team and it was just basically with no vocals, right? But they redid the team for the second season, I believe it was, right? But there was something kind of likable about that first team, right? So it works there, right? But to me, in terms of depicting the characters, I felt like that TV show really nailed it in terms of, yeah, you're not really supposed to take these characters silly at all, seriously at all, right? So yeah, when you hear the thing say it's clobbering time, it's like, yeah, that's the story, right? That's Fantastic Four. And as I wrap up here, I still, well, I have to put this on my bucket list. I really do need to watch that 1967 Fantastic Four animated series. 'Cause I know that's
The
where,
cartoon, yeah.
the late great MF Doom was pulling his samples from with the album
Right.
Operation Doomsday. That's where he was getting his
Yeah.
samples from, right? So I really need to check that out, right? But yeah, before we move on to 2005, yeah, any thoughts on the TV series from the 90s? Any thoughts on that?
I actually almost never watched this. I watched a couple of episodes. That is about it. The one I actually more familiar with the old 67 version because when I remember watching a lot of this when cable just came out. The first thing I changed to was Cartoon Network and saw this playing. I'm like, I ended up playing a bunch of those. Like it ran the syndication. And yeah. MF do just take a bunch of this and the Spider Man, from that time period and play with that. So is that
Right. So yeah, cut to 2005 now, and Tim's story of barbershop fame gives us
right?
Fantastic Four. And even back then, I didn't really, I wasn't taken aback by, wait, the guy who did barbershop, which was decent, like, wait,
Yeah.
he doing well, he doing Fantastic Four. I was like, okay, all right, okay, cool. I mean, big up yourself, do you have to do, right? But you gotta keep in mind that this is right after a goated Marvel superhero movie by the name of Spider-Man 2,
Right.
which by then, I mean, the bar was set so high, Trent, as far as Marvel films, right? I mean, yes, Marvel Studios exists as yet, you know what I mean? And yes, it was Sony behind that scenes, right? When it came to Fox and the Fox Marvel films, I was digging the X-Men films. I really, really enjoyed X2. The first X-Men, I like it for what it was. It don't stand out as much as it did, but I was liking what Fox was doing at the moment, right? And then, when you get to R-rated stuff, I think the first Punisher movie came out in 2004 as well, right? So at the time, the bar was high, right? And I should also mention 2004, Blade Trinity happened. So, with every up, you must have a down as well, too, right? When it comes to Marvel. So there was that. It's like, whatever. But yeah, when it came to Fantastic Four, I'll never forget, right? I saw both this and Silver Surfer, Rising Silver Surfer, in Palladium, right? Which is no more, right? It was a little cinema that was into the put I used to go to when it comes to films where I was like, because yes, Caribbean cinemas had existed, right? But I didn't go there on a regular, right? But like I would have a choice. If there were shows that I really wanted to see, I would go with Zone to see it. If there were shows I was real iffy about, I would go Palladium to see it, right? And thankfully this was during the era of the double feature, right? But yeah, when I watched Fantastic Four, honestly, the first time, it was a show that I honestly never bothered to recap. I may have glanced at it when it showed on cable, but I just never like really cared to sit down and watch the entirety of it. I never even saw it on on bootleg DVD at the time, right? I just saw it as, oh well, this was trying to capture the spirit of Fantastic Four, but it didn't really work out to me, right? It just even back then it felt like a product of its time, right? But in recapping it, right, what I will say positively is that I felt like casting wise, I felt like the cast really worked well together, right? I'm not even gonna pronounce the guy's name who plays Reed Richards, but I thought that he was good. He was good as Reed, right? Um, is the guy, I forget his name, Michael.
Michael Chiklis. Michael
Right.
Chiklis,
Yeah,
yeah.
Michael Chiklis, right? Yeah. Um, yeah, he was, I would say, near perfect though as the thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I watched
Yeah.
it
Well,
today.
the only issue, the only problem is that he, because he can actually, they actually make the thing short now because
Oh,
they don't really
yeah.
do much with Michael Chiklis. And Michael Chiklis not at all. I was a fan of Michael Chiklis since the commish, since then. I was a fan of this dude. So when it was that, and then he did, oh God, I forget the name of
Well,
the
the
other shit.
Shield is still on my to watch
The Shield,
list.
right?
I
Yeah,
need to watch
The
that
Shield,
shit.
right?
I need to watch that shit. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I was a big fan of him since the Shield. Well, not the Shield, even before that, the commish. Um, I really like that show, and then the Shield was great. So when I heard he was cast as Ben Grimm, I was like, yeah, that's a great call. But the one thing is that because they couldn't get the right size and they had to do the normal human thing, it was just looking like just a dumpy guy, especially when he was wearing normal clothes. So it wasn't looking good looking, but it was still a good, like, from an acting standpoint, he's a good actor, and it worked for the most part. Yeah, they get Chris Evans
Yes, yeah,
as John
yeah.
Storm.
Which is really interesting in retrospect, right? That he
Right,
was
yeah,
able to play, yeah, one of the big, characters in the MCU. That would be Captain America, right?
right,
Yeah.
right.
But it was cool seeing him as young Chris Evans in that show because
Yeah,
I
because
wasn't.
before that it was not another teen movie, I think.
Oh
That's
right,
what I
he
remember
wasn't
from.
that. Yes, yes, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what
yeah.
made him big. And I didn't watch it in theaters. I watched it actually on on bootleg, right? And yeah, as dumb as stupid as that show was, I had fun
Right.
with that shit. I had fun with that shit, right? But yeah,
Yeah,
and of course, Jessica Alba because she was
right.
one of the bodies, one of the
Yeah,
early 2000s bodies, and I mean, like, yeah, in the
right.
show she was fine in that, right? But yeah,
Yeah,
but yeah, Michael Chiklis, though, he was near perfect as a thing, right? And watch it over, right? I was amazed at how the prosthetic work holds up, though. Like it surprisingly
right.
works, right? Over the
Yeah,
years,
okay.
I was kind of like laughing at it, like in my head, I was like, back in 2005, that looked real shipping it away. But seeing it again, I was like, nah, it works so because you could tell is the actor underneath it, right? You could tell that is an actor and not a CG design, a CG creature, right?
Yeah, then
And it works. It actually works.
I remember hearing you casting Julian McMahon as Doctor Doom, and so at the time I remember I liked Julian McMahon from Since Charmed. I thought he was great in that. Uh, Never got into Nip Tuck, but that was a solid enough show. So I was like, all right, this is an interesting call, but what is like what are they gonna do with it? And yeah, I kind of don't like Julian McMahon in this role. I like Julian
Yeah.
McMahon, but thing is, so
Here's the
RP.
thing, all right, yeah, R.I.P. though, right? But here's the thing,
Yeah, yeah,
as Victor Von Doom, he kinda sorta works. He have the Swami businessman thing. I know he is not the
right,
dictator, right? I know
right.
that, right? But it's just like the previous incarnation, they always want to try to work it around that Reed and Victor were like friends and they did things together. So because Reed into science, well, tech and whatnot, Victor had to be the big, billionaire who gets right. So they had to frame it like that, right? I was like, oh gosh, man, like where's Latveria? And they actually bring up Latveria later on in the film, right? But whatever.
Right.
But that gets to what really pulls this movie down for me, though. The pacing, the story is
Yeah.
so poorly told. You
Yeah, it's pretty
literally
bad.
have to
It's
wait
pretty
an
bad.
hour and 15 minutes for Doom to even appear as Doctor
Yeah,
Doom. And then when he shows up,
it's
it's
pretty
like,
bad. And
oh,
then
we wait so
what they
long
do
for
with
this? Really?
yeah, what they do with Doom in this was kind of weird. Like like I didn't think they could have do a worse Doom, but yet they did. But in this, the whole is his skin that is metal and like no that not working. Like that sucks. So he's like a literal metal man instead of the armor about his body. He's like what? No, none of that working. But yeah, I can get into that. It was just a bunch of weird calls. And look, much like how I didn't like uh Spider-Man having natural webbing. Same thing. Like, stick to the comics now. Like, why does he have shape in the comics? Like, I still love the first Spider-Man, Sam Raimi Spider-Man, but like the natural webbing never do it for me. I never got into that.
Yeah.
Same thing.
And the
It's
thing
like
is,
purple.
the thing is about it, right? You gotta remember in the 2000s, right? Remember I don't want to put all the blame on Fox, right? But Sony did it as well too, right? They always have to make these calls to the character traits that we know, right? So to make
Right.
it more believable, it has to be natural weapon, right? So to make Doctor Doom more believable, we had to justify why he have the suit on and not just the mask. Or he have to have metallic skin, but then also too he could he could like disrupt the electricity in that area. Like, wait, Doctor Doom never do that. Why are we doing this, right? But
Yeah,
yeah,
they give him weird powers. They give him like actual powers. Like that's not
yeah, like
he's
that's
a
not
scientist.
Doom, Dre.
Like,
That's
he's not
not Doom.
powers.
Yeah,
Like he's get powers the same way Doctor Strange have powers. Like
right,
he's a
exactly.
scientist, he's also a wizard, and he's just a smart dude. And he just a crowd, but he's a top. But the main thing with Doctor Doom is that he's a complete crash out. So
Yeah,
that's why so that's why. But apart from Doctor Doom is one of my favorite characters. I'm rather shocked that they can't get him right in live action.
I
And hopefully
know,
we'll get
boy.
like
Yeah,
hopefully
hopefully we'll get that,
yeah
which we'll talk about soon enough,
right.
right? Yeah, and
Mhm.
I was okay, right? I was letting this moment slide, right? Victor being in the same ship that our heroes
Right,
go, and then the
right.
gamma ray stuff happen, right?
Yeah, all right, fine,
I
all
was
right,
okay
fine.
with that to
He's
know.
he's 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 caused by the same cosmic rays thing. Like, all right. I mean,
Yeah,
again,
sorry,
they have to give
cosmic,
him
not
powers
gamma.
somehow.
Oops, I said
Well,
gamma.
whatever, the
Yeah,
same, whatever, plot bullshit, right?
yeah,
Same
yep,
plot
yeah.
bullshit, really.
Plot contrivance, right? Yeah, yeah. But
Right,
yeah,
plot contrivance. Right.
yeah, but boy, the metal skin thing just didn't work for me. And just the
Never
look,
would
though,
prove.
the faces didn't work for me, right? But I did like the actor and what he brought to the table.
Right.
At least the actors brought something to the table, right? I know in retrospect people might sort of roll the eyes and say that Jessica Alba was terrible, right? I felt like she just wasn't
Right.
given much to do, right? But I felt like the story really was the story really leaned a lot on the thing. A little too much on the thing, to be honest, right? Because yeah, they had a moment where the thing kind of turned heel and went to Victor, and he asked Victor to help him out, and then Victor stabbed him in the back and all kind of bullshit. Like what? And
Right.
actually, like Chris Evans as the hot-headed, Johnny Storm. That actually worked, right? Although, boy, talk about making the show dated, right? You seen X
Yeah.
Games to us, like X Games,
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
man literally makes an excuse to go into some X Games thing with and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
go on a
The
bike and
snowboard.
like
Yeah.
what? Yeah, well
Yeah. Snowboarding.
the
Yeah.
snowboarding moment
Snowboarding.
was
Yeah.
cool. That was cool because that was a
Yeah.
nice bit with him find out about his powers for the first time. That was a good bit, right?
Right.
But I
Yeah.
didn't need the thing with the bike. I was like, oh what? And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
close this, right? I remember hearing this when I saw it for the first time. And when I was rewatching films, I was like, wait, I know there was a rap song. I know there was a rap song that played this number. I can't remember what it was. I'll close this, right? After that whole scene with him with the bike, right? And he do the flame on thing. They had the go out to play the chorus to Lloyd Banks on fire. I
Yeah.
hear that and I kinda cringe. No,
Yeah.
the Huss. I love the song, eh? One of the best
Yeah. Well,
Lloyd Banks song, one of the
it's,
best
it's such a
bangers,
lame.
one of the best
It's such a
G-Unit
lame.
bangers ever, but just to include
Yeah.
that right afterwards, I was like,
Yeah. Really.
Fox, what are they doing? Well, why they
Yeah.
do this
Real crazy.
fortune? No, feel it. I hope
Yeah.
Lloyd got back from this trip, but nah, that was terrible, right? But yeah,
Yeah. You know.
not a terrible, terrible, terrible movie way, but it's really not a show that I could see myself watching. Even back then, I just saw it once and I just glanced a couple times on cable, but I never cared to see that show, right? But yeah,
Right.
what really brought it on, unfortunately, was just the story. It took too damn long to tell the story. I admire the character moments and the build up and all that. That's cool. I like what they did with the thing and him coming to terms with his identity. That's all cool. But you had to
Yeah.
tell
Yeah.
a story, and it took so damn long to do so. I'm gonna talk about how they corrected that, but then still dropped the ball with the next film, right? But yeah, your thoughts on 2005's Fantastic Four, and in particular,
I
how you felt when you first saw the film.
Yeah, no, it's a total step down compared to some like Spider-Man and thing. The quality was there, but it was like some objective terrible movie. It had a couple cool set pieces, like the part with thing hitting the truck. That was kind of cool. Um, what's her name? She was in this. Kerry Washington was in this as thing. The blind girl. Good
Yeah, I
casting,
was
I find.
surprised though. Like I
But
watched the face, like, hey, you scary though. What? You was in this? I forgot.
yeah, and so they're making it work for what it was. I can't be mad at any of it. It's just like it's fine. Like this was just a decent outing for what it was at the time. It is a lot of it don't hold up because he has such a product at the mid 2000s, especially Johnny Storm being just a douche in general, stuff like that. But I dug the hell out of this for what it was. Yeah,
All right, well that's interesting. You actually like the film. Okay. I think it's
right,
passable.
right.
It's passable. And it's the same thing I could
Yeah,
say about Rising Silver Surfer, right? So this is one where just talking quickly, where I feel like some people will be kind of split on this, right? Some people might prefer this one over the last film because I actually was surprised that the last film, the 2005 film, was a commercial disappointment, right? It didn't make back its money, right? But this one actually did, right? Even though it didn't get that really it like the reviews weren't all that solid in my opinion, right? But what I felt this film as a Rising Silver Surfer did, right? And keep in mind this is 2007, this came out, right? At least they told the story faster. There was a quicker pacing, but then again, the runtime was 90 minutes, so they had no room to waste time, right? And yet they kind of found ways to waste time. They kind of found ways to slow the story down. They found ways to add
Uh,
things to the story that made
that
no
dancing,
sense.
yeah, that dancing scene now, that's
I,
real
I, I
butchers.
watched that, boy. I
Yeah,
was like,
yeah.
ooh, what is
This
that? What
movie,
is
the second
that?
movie, I like the second movie. This movie has some cooler moments, but this second movie is much worse for me for one simple reason. Yeah, they fuck up on boy bad actors. Galactus. And
Boy,
look,
I
look,
will
look. You know, look,
never forget seeing that for
look
the
how they,
first time, right? And
yeah. Look how they massacre my boy. Yeah,
yeah,
like,
look how they massacred my boy Dread. Like I would never
yeah.
forget Dread. Like the moment I
But the
hear,
thing is,
uh,
no, the thing is, like, it started strong. You know, like I like what they do with Silver Silver. Like, it's not
yeah,
a bad idea. They had
yeah. So like
mm-hmm.
the early chase scene with the Silver Surfer and
The
Human
torch.
Torch, I was loving
Yeah.
that. There's a moment where you see the Silver Surfer on the board and like he lean his body forward,
Mm-hmm.
but how he do that,
Mm-hmm.
he keep his body straight, look great, right? And
Yeah.
in retrospect,
But
the,
who was he actor for the face? It was Doug Jones, right?
Noah Doug Jones played somebody else. He played somebody. He played one of the
Okay,
scientists in the movie, but I don't know
okay,
whose face they used. But it was Lawrence
right.
Fishburne. They got
Lawrence
to do
Fishburne's
the
voice, yeah,
voice. And
yeah, Lawrence Fishburne's voice, right,
all right, our hot controversial take here. They could have cast anybody else to play this character, voice wise.
yeah. Right,
Like
right.
it's Lawrence Fishburne, right? I admire
Yeah, it's
how he
fine.
tried to lower the bass of his voice, but still they could have cast anybody else to do this. Like this felt like just so easy because he didn't have much lines in that movie anyway, right? So I don't know, like he just do that far back. He clearly did
Right,
that far back, right? I'm sorry to say this, but he clearly did that for money, right? But anyway, but yeah, boy, I would never forget. Again, I went pleaded to see this, right? I like, all right, well, Silver Surfer, okay, cool. That means Galactus, right? And just like Fantastic Four, I was not big on this character at all, right? In the comics, again, it is clearly 60s counterculture shit, right? Like, dog,
right.
surfer, like a silver surfer, like come on, man, like
Yeah.
come on, man, right? You know, that's what it is. It's clearly a product of the 60s, right? But
Yeah,
because
listen, Jack Kirby and them was doing some level drugs. Like when you
yes, yeah,
like,
so some level shrooms that was on, by level
I mean,
LSD
you
when
know,
they do that, way.
That Kirby crackle had to come from somewhere, right? So
Yeah, boy. Yeah, boy. Yeah, you could tell they want some LSD when they make that, right? But because the character stood the test of time, I was like, all right, I respect it. I wasn't that big on the cartoon. It was kind of forgettable, but I used to watch it when it was on TV. I think it used to show that Saturday morning. It's like, oh, look at, all right. So because I want to learn more about the character, I never knew much about it, right? I didn't even know it was in oh gosh, the original Infinity War comic. I didn't even know that till like a few till
right,
the
yeah, I
Avengers
forget that.
Infinity War movie came out, right? I didn't know that shit, right?
Right,
Anyway,
yeah.
but of course, the reason why you take in Silver Surfer is because of Galactus and just the size of the
Right,
character, just what the character is, right? This world, this planet devouring alien giant. That's kind of amazing, right? Again, counterculture stuff, right? So yeah, I imagine a lot of people, myself included, went into Rising Silver Surfer like, all right, we're gonna see Galactus for the first time in live action. You see, it's a cloud. And while I was
yeah,
watching this movie, I tell myself, all right, 2007, okay, the X-Men movies already came out already. We already had, well, oh gosh, we had Spider-Man 3 the same year. But I mean, right, when it came to Spider-Man 2, right, the shit won an Oscar for best visual effects, right? No matter it was from Sony. I tell myself, all right, when it comes to superhero movies, right, you could go out of your way to create this character, right? To give us Galactus in the flesh, right? And it felt like Fox cheaped out of it and said, okay, I don't think that people will understand the logic behind this character, so let's just make it this dark menacing cloud. A cloud? Really? Fox?
real fear,
Really? I watch that, I get
real fear.
so mad with that. Like, no
Yeah.
effort was put to even trying to make the character look the way it did, Nah. But
Mm.
outside that, though, I mean, the chemistry is there with the actors. I was liking the whole wedding thing, which I know is part of the Fantastic Four lore, right? We're gonna have the wedding between Sue
Right.
and Reed. But as on the day of the wedding, big earth shattering thing happens and they have to leave, right? So that was a cool moment, right? But I just felt like pacing, like, all right, the pacing is faster here, right? Yes, but the story just didn't work for me. I did not care at all for because Johnny gets choked by Silver Surfer, suddenly when they touch him, he could take the powers. And it's like, why? What? How this happen? And then they had the goal in the climax for the other three of the Fantastic Four to give Johnny their powers. So he have all four powers, they fighting them. But the question remains now that if they touch him, how come they didn't get his flea powers? They never answered, but nobody cares, right? And I felt like unfortunately they wasted the Silver Surfer. He was kind of pointless in the movie because he was there as a herald for a cloud. Like, what's the point of all that, right? But at the end of the day, as a wrap up this section here, I don't hate Rising Silver Surfer. I could, if like I just genuinely have to do, I can watch both of them back to back. I find like quality wise they are the same. It's just that one just has a quicker pace than the other one. But the storytelling is still mediocre. The character chemistry is solid, yes, and the actors are doing a good job to make them likable, right? Because yes, they are all likable. They are all likable in this show, right? And just the banter between the four of them are great, right? But it's just the story just doesn't do the material justice. Neither one of these two stories do, right? In my opinion. But yeah, Ricardo, your thoughts on Rising Silver Surfer? And how you felt when you first saw it?
Yeah, it's shocking how they just again. It was going good until that Black stuff. Like really, they do that, but real failure. That don't work. Yeah, it's a pretty bad movie. I somehow like it at least. Also, bringing back Doom in this is so stupid. Like how they utilize Doom in this, real terrible. All this is just terrible, just total nonsense. And there are good people in this. Like looking back at it, it's like, oh, Andrew Brower in this and thing. Like, yeah, I would, but it's real trash.
Yeah, I forgot. We boy from Brooklyn Nine-Nine was this, but it's a shame he died the way he
Yeah,
died. That was like oof. That was Jesus, right?
yeah,
And then 2015 happened. Now this was already the time when we started Bears Beats Bailey, and
yeah.
there was a particular movie that we didn't get a chance to talk about, but thankfully we mentioned it in our season finale. Yeah, as far as one of the worst shows of that year, and like I said before, that could have been my number one, but in preparing for my worst of list, I tell myself, let me actually sit down and see this 50 Shades of Grey shit for myself. And I watched it at home. I was like, yep, this had to be my number one. But if I did not see that, yeah, Fan Four Stick would have been, my number one for sure, right? For me, right, you can make the argument that, oh, Josh Trank actually, the studio should have trusted Josh Trank and he should have just kept his vision instead of us butting in and changing things up after the fact because he was this asshole who was talking shit to the actors, in particular to Kate Mara, right? And being drunk on set and all that kind of stuff, right? But to me, agree to disagree. I don't think it would have mattered if they had kept the Josh Trank version or cut or whatever you want to call it, or if Fox had hired somebody else. Right? The point
I,
is,
I, I,
they did
I
not
don't get
get
the
the
sense.
point of the story from the jump. There was actually a writer who was attached from the jump. I forgot his name, and he was working with Josh Trank, right? But Josh was like, no, because I did this movie Chronicle, which I never forget. I actually went to Caribbean cinemas and saw.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed.
it is
It's
great.
like, no, I want this to be like Chronicle, man. He wanted to be like Chronicle, but it's like, no, dog. I read the comics. I know the comics. Let it be like this. Let me do this. It's like, no, no, no. And then he had a fire in him or something like that. If they had kept that guy's vision, we would have a much better movie. So it would not matter
Yeah,
if it was Fox's version or Josh Trank's version. It'd still be trash because that one guy who knew the material better than anybody at that point in time would have wrote a better script, and out of that we would have gotten a much better film than this piece of shit was, right? But yeah, let me take a break and yeah, you say what you have to say.
it's a shame how it didn't work out the way it did. I don't know. Like I have no idea if it would have worked out the version of his, but it showed no signs of that. To be honest, I just gonna straight up that I get a feeling that if he got his perfect vision of it, it'd still be terrible. It still looked like a bunch of like stuff in a hangar and a warehouse area, and everything looking shitty and boring and toned down. And is serious business, and Doctor Doom is terrible. So I don't know which version of this would have worked out. To be honest, like people like to act as if well, he's a missing genius that didn't get a chance to do his thing. Like no, this is sorry, this would be bad. And then yeah, he was kind of trash. He was just like really entitled from what I understand. I mean, the story behind the story is a more interesting narrative.
Yes,
To
it
be
is.
honest, so
Yeah.
it's like whatever.
And
So it's
I
that.
know there was an article that came out around the time when he did his God Awful Capone film, right, which almost killed the career
Right,
of poor Tom Hardy, right? But
right.
I need to look for that though because it kind of explain why Josh was the way he was, right? I think they mentioned something about how he was bullied when he was a kid, and it's just that sort of entitled behavior, right, where And I always see this as a cautionary tale, right? The idea of, oh, life dealt me so much blows, man. So I just need to, like, I get this rare opportunity to make this big budget movie. So I need to prove myself. I need to prove my haters wrong and all that kind of stuff, right? So you try to prove to your bullies from high school, whoever it is, that you have a purpose and you need to belong on this earth, right? And you just want to be again. You want to bring this whole entitled behavior to a film that isn't even about you. But you could tell when you watch this, it have aspects about it that kind of relate to him, especially with characters being torn down and being looked down upon and whatnot, being treated as freaks and monsters, all that kind of stuff. And listener, this came out after the Dark Knight trilogy, right? This came out after Iron Man, right? This came out after Man of Steel, right? Whoever, whether it's Josh or the studio, whoever decided that we need to do this grounded in reality take on the friggin' Fantastic Four, boy, terrible, terrible, terrible idea.
Yeah.
It don't work.
Everybody.
It don't translate.
Yeah.
And when I rewatch this
Yeah.
film, because yes, unfortunately, I rewatched the film. I only saw it once back in 2015 and hated it. But yeah, I rewatched it. I was like, no, this grounded realism thing don't work at all, Jen. Why would they do
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. They don't know how to balance it, and it don't make no sense. It don't work.
Yeah.
As a conceit.
Now,
It's
now,
just
now listen,
unfortunate. Like,
now I have a few positives. I have a few positives. Just sorry to interrupt. I have a few positives, right? The cast, the actors, solid, right? They could have been in better films. They could have been in better films, like Miles Teller, for example. Okay, he came
right.
right off the success of Whiplash, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think no, the Creed. I think Creed came out before this. I think so. I think Creed came out before Fan Force thing.
Right.
I can't remember, right? But yeah, Michael B. Jordan was on the rise, right? He was on the
Right.
rise, right? And Kate Mara on the rise with with House of Cards and Jimmy Bell. Well, he was in other shows. I just can't remember them off the top of my head right now, right? So he had a great cast, right? Yeah, and even Reg E. Catchy from House of Cards was there, right? Reggie, right? Yeah. Even though, in retrospect, that man was doing, like, I felt like if in the Matrix Resurrections, right, if they had decided to have a new architect character, he would have fit that voice well. That man have an architect voice, so it's like, I am the architect. I created the Matrix. This very deep voice where it's like real architect, like every time the man talks, right? But yeah, there are a couple of great moments. Like, I do like the moment where you see after, well, this is basically where you see the Fantastic Four in this lab being tested on, and there's a moment where you see Reed was trying to get out of rubble. But you just see them watching him move now, but you're not really thinking, you're thinking that he somehow gets foot out of the rubble, but there's a shot that they show where his foot was lodged into it, right? But you're just watching him move now. And then he looked back and was like, oh shit, his legs stretched from where his foot stopped off at. And you see like that, right? So those moments actually work. Like the when they lead into body horror work at some points, but that particular moment I thought really worked, right? But just the over seriousness of it all, and boy, that's what I thought the 2005 Fantastic Four piece, it was off, right? This one was so sluggish, shit. And this is like, I think it's like 100 minutes or what, like I want 40 minutes roughly, right? And this thing is moving so slow, Dread. You know what I mean? The whole dimension thing, and then, well, Victor Von Doom is there, and he end up running the place, and he become probably the worst Doctor Doom ever put to screen and whatnot. All that was terrible. I'm just watching all these calls, these creative calls, and like, who signed off on this? Who signed up for this? Who thought it was a great idea? Then they had the goal to just give me this really lame final fight scene that is like too little, too late. This movie was terrible. So yeah, hands down. I think, if I'm not mistaken, yes, I rank this as one of the worst films of the past decade, right? Even worse in retrospect than 50 Shades of Grey, right? But yeah, there was no excuse for this show to be that bad. Again, I dig the body horror stuff. I get where they're coming from. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
The cast, they're cool. They sleepwalking through it, yeah, but you could tell they want to make this thing work, right? But boy, that story was a mess, and I don't even talk about the direction. This emphasis on this dour tone thrown by, it does not work. It's the Fantastic Four. Who thought that it would have made sense to crowd in reality for the job, boy? Nah, man. They probably regretted that to this day. And now for the Fantastic Four, not to be confused with 94's The Fantastic Four, but the Fantastic Four First Steps, right?
Right.
And this is finally Marvel Studios' attempt at doing a proper Fantastic Four story, right? And listen, this I'm just gonna see this. I'm just gonna keep this preamble short and sweet before you get into the synopsis. By default, by default, this is already the best Fantastic Four movie we've ever gotten by default, because the previous four films could even do the characters justice, could even tell a proper story, right? So this one alone, just the mere fact that it's from Marvel Studios, is like, yeah, well, it had to be good. Like there's nowhere else to go but up there, because them last four films just brought them characters down, you know what I mean? But this had to be the moment where the characters were finally given justice, right? But yeah, Ricardo, spoiler free synopsis on First Steps.
So here's the thing. This movie is a bit of a stretch and kind of transparent, but it'll still fire, right? Right. Yeah, I kind of
Ha
loved
ha
it.
ha ha ha. I see what you did there. Ha ha
Right,
ha ha.
right,
Okay.
right, right, right. So yeah, I kind of loved it. I thought this was pretty cool. What they decided to do with this is just set up its own Earth 828, which is clever given like what the references are like that. And they just set up their own world, and this world, Fantastic Four dominates, not dominates, but they're the heroes of the world, and they kind of controlling everything in a subtle, soft sense. They form the quote unquote Future Foundation, which I like. That's a nice little reference. Everybody running the world is this kind of 1960s Kennedy era esque retrofuturism that they're going with. And yeah, they just believe in their own material and make it work as it is. It hits the ground running like with Superman, right? And what I'll say though is that this feels more uh yesterday's homework than Superman did. Like Superman felt like its own thing. Whilst this felt like just what I would call yesterday's homework, right? Which is not necessarily a bad thing. But yeah, everybody for years will say, look, don't waste your time with this nonsense. Since it's Tim Story movies, try to cater to the Incredibles. Because yeah, around that time when Tim Story movies came out, the Incredibles came out. I was like, oh yeah, this
Yes,
is like
yes,
the
yes. How,
actual
how, how can I
yeah,
forget that? Yes, 2004.
yeah,
Right.
this is exactly this is the actual Fantastic Four movie. This is where you do it. You play it to the time period and play with that whole aesthetic and the 60s era stuff, and then you tell a story as it is. And yeah, that's what we got. You just tell that story. We get to Galactus, and then we're gonna figure out some at way at some point where how they're gonna meet up with the MCU. But they just tell its own story, and it worked. I thought this was excellent. I really liked it. I didn't like it as much as say Superman, but it did work. And as I say, it's yesterday's homework. In the sense that, this is something that people were saying for years they should have done. Do this, do this style, cater this style. And yeah, finally we get a filmmaker that made it and pull it off, and we get a really really solid outing. Um, what I'll say is that the central conceit is good. Like it doesn't play with too much things. I felt they could have done more with Ben and them. You know, and then the biggest problem I have is that it felt a bit chopped down. But and they miss with the underutilized cameos. Because I thought the stuff with Ben and Natasha Lyonne's character was great. That was kind of cute. They could have do more with that. And then I have this fellow Walter Hauser, I forget his name. Who's playing Mole Man. He was good in
Yes,
this.
yes, yes. I remember him from Cobra Kai actually, right? And
Right,
yeah, I
right.
was actually surprised that yeah, they actually put this character in this show. I was like, what? Okay, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, that's about it. As I say, not as great as some like The Incredibles, but it's a pretty good Fantastic Four movie, and it does all come together and really work. And well, just the only other thing that was disappointing that we didn't have no MF do mini soundtrack somewhere, right? They could have do something. However, uh, I
But
thought,
but Ricardo, it's the '60s, man. It's the '60s.
yeah, so it's not 60s actually. It's
I
another
know,
world.
I know, but yeah.
Instead of hip hop somehow maybe. But it does yesterday's homework thing, not too much. But it's either they set up a really cool conflict. Involving a certain someone and another certain someone and a trade off, and it's a little kind of let's call it trolley problem kind of thing, and they make it work. And they do a big super science thing. They don't use their powers as much because they already in the world, so it's not that much powers used. It's more brains and smarts and figuring it out. As I said, the only person who already have an arc to speak of is Ben. Everybody else gets a great arc. I think Sue Storm, Vanessa Kirby is excellent. Her arc is probably the strongest characterization. But everybody got arc. And they make it work, and I just dug the hell out of it. So yeah, it's a fantastic fun movie. Good chemistry, good characterization. They finally get it right. Yeah, I dug the hell out of this. I loved it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, man. I really, really enjoyed this film, right? I have to think for myself or decide for myself, sorry, whether I enjoy this more than Superman, right? I at the moment I enjoy it just as, right? But I kind of have this over Superman at the moment. Again, as I said with my Superman review, because of the expectations I went in with, and I got way more than I expected. I feel like if I just watch it over, I'll love it, right? But so at the moment I enjoy First Steps over this, right? But I have a feeling that by come year's end, both these movies will be my top 10, right? Because yeah, I mean,
Right.
just as a superhero movie, regardless of property, yeah, this is great in my opinion, right?
Correct.
Like I said, as I jokingly said, I mean, yes, this is obviously the best Fantastic Four movie we've ever got, right? For one thing, what really caught me by surprise, right? And this is what the 2005, well, the Tim Story films tried to do, but they never they did pull it off properly, and it just came off like, how is this even possible? The celebrity status that the Fantastic Four have. I love
Right.
that in
Right.
this film they just set it up very early, right? You see the origin story, you know how they become the way they become, and the let's just say the plot device that they use to establish this, right, or to reinforce these themes, or I should say the backstory, absolutely works, right? So I love that you didn't need to see the backstory all over again, right? So
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
that's why people
But they,
compare this
they,
to Superman too, where it's like
yeah,
we don't
exactly.
need
They
the
do.
backstory thing again, we just kind of jump in with the
Exactly.
ball rolling. We just sort of
They,
jump
they,
in to the story.
Yeah, they do a good job with just that hitting the ground running approach to the storytelling. I don't mind that at all. Like we do like it's they're not super popular to say you probably could get away with this, but it works for somebody like me who's like, yeah, it's fine. You tell that story and they tell it fast enough. Like in and out, they show a couple of references. I think the old cast from the 1994 film is in one of these little circles in that opening montage. If I
Yeah,
remember correctly. So
but from what I read online though, it's sort of blink and you miss it, right?
yeah,
They
it's
are
pretty quick.
literally in the background. Yeah,
Right, yeah, it's just one of these circles when they were doing the editing thing, and then they had this really cool like they do the Iron Man thing, right? They do the Iron Man thing where it's like, oh, I need to tell you about them. Here's them, and then you get to the point of that storytelling, and that is a great little thing. They use a TV show as a reference point, much like with Iron Man use the award show,
right.
and
Yeah, yeah,
that's what I like about this. It felt very Phase One, right? It felt like watching something from Phase One. Just you're telling a story, but it's a kind of in media res, kind of halfway kind of stuff.
yeah.
The person already had a life and well established in the world for one reason, and now we're gonna learn about them in another arc for another reason, and they make it work, but within the superhero conceit. And then they make a quick reference to like the first comic cover. I forget the name of the creature. That is the same first Fantastic Four comic cover. It's like, all
Oh,
right,
right,
cool,
right. That one with that sort of
yeah, yeah,
green alien thing. Yes,
right,
yes,
right,
yeah.
right, 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 yeah,
How they
yeah.
redo that was really cool. And I
Yeah,
just
yeah,
love the
yeah,
fact that they lean into those things from the 60s, right? Because they have the
exactly.
perfect setting, right? It's ultra modern version of the 60s. So yes, let's lean
Yeah,
into that whole that
yeah,
old school. What was it? Was it Amazing Fantasy? That was the name of the book that the
right,
Fantastic Four came up from. Yeah, let's just
right,
redo that shit. Let's bring in Mole Man because that's
right,
part of Fantastic Four. And as I bring up the 94 film, right? Remember I said earlier on that, the character that they have here, I forgot what the character's name was in that old film, right? The one who was supposed to be the mole man, but he isn't, right? I felt like the
right,
inclusion of the mole man here was just kind of just saying, look,
yeah,
let me just do the mole man. And funny
right.
thing, before I shut up, right? There was a friend of mine who sat behind me, right? And he was saying, wait, that man looked like the Underminer Dread from The Incredibles. I was
Right,
like,
that is your
yes,
reference.
because that's where they
Exactly.
got the idea for the
Yeah,
Underminer from. I was like, oh,
that was your reference.
yeah,
Exactly.
that's what it
Exactly.
is. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, so I mean, as I say, I mean, it would have been like, ultimately, I really thought at some point that, the MCU was just going to straight up just hire Brad Bird and make a Fantastic Four movie. Like, I really thought they were just going to ultimately do that. And they don't do that, but we get something close enough. And this director is great. I forget what he did before. Shit, what was the movie did he known for before? This director. It's slipping my mind right now. But this dude is great. Like he just, sets up the thing. We get basically the Mad Men world. And we get all these references to the 60s. Like they had a whole thing with Panam. Like, oh shit, Panam was a thing, right? Yeah, forget about that. And,
Yeah.
they make it work, and it just comes together really well. And then the actual story itself is solid. Like involving like the Silver Surfer and Galactus and what Galactus is about. Innocent is excellent as Galactus. I thought he was great.
Yes, yes.
He,
Ralph
yeah,
Innocent, the voice
yeah, yeah,
though, and just
yeah,
it's just the gravitas that verbally, right, that he gives
yes,
the character. It
yeah.
really he sounds like
Right.
Galactus. He really sounds like
And then
Galactus.
he was just straight up terrifying as Galactus. He really come across as medicine and thing. The action was like there's one big action sequence in the middle that's great. Involving a black hole. That's all you need to know. I
Yep,
thought that
yep,
was
yep, yep.
excellent.
That was
But
amazing. That was amazing. I'll put it
yeah,
like this, right? I feel Christopher Nolan
yeah,
probably, if you haven't seen it, will watch that scene and be like, "Yep, this is one of the best movies I've seen all year. I love this movie."
right.
One moment,
Yeah,
Yeah,
some real coup shenanigans went down, right? But yeah, the finale itself, I thought they could have make it work a little better. It was a little on the clumsy end of things, mostly with where Galactus was and how to move him from point A to point B. I thought that was a bit clumsy how that played out. I didn't really hate it; it was fine. But I just thought he was great. He was genuinely medicine. No cloud bullshit this time. They make it work. They have her have a similar arc. Similar arc to Silver Silver, it's the Silver Silver arc. They make it work. That's where Johnny Storm's arc comes in, and they make that work.
yeah.
They change her
And in this
story.
case, no, oh, the Silver Surfer grabbed Johnny and Johnny could like swap powers. None of that bullshit. None of that, right? And
Right.
slight spoiler. For the first time ever in live action history, we get to see a bit of a backstory of this new Silver Surfer. And I'll put it like this,
Right.
right? Well, just to touch quickly on this, right? Even though it's not really a thing, right? I will never forget when the official trailer come out, and I think, but the thing is, there was an article that came out before that, they was going to, gender switch the character of the Silver Surfer, right? He was like, "Whoa, you trying to make this walk all of a sudden?" Oh, that kind of stuff,
Good.
right? And then when you see face, I was like, "No big deal." No big deal. I kind of call she Silver Body in retrospect though, but other than
Right.
that though, I thought that Julia Garner did a great job though. It's
Yeah, she's
just
good.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's not
What they do with
much
this?
of her in the film unfortunately, but it's not
No.
as bad as Rising Silver Surfer, where yeah, it was just
Right.
there for the sake of being there. At least there was a purpose to this character
So what
being
they
in the
do?
film.
Yeah, what they do with it is something from the comics, so that's why it's not a big deal, and it's another world, so it's fine. Like I don't really have, I don't really care one way or the other. People just have a big meltdown over these dumb things. Are tired of that bullshit. Are too big for that. Are too old for this bullshit. Enough. But I just thought she was great. She had a good enough arc, and especially with Johnny and how she bounced off of Johnny. All that's fine. That's fine enough. Again, very phase one. Don't get into it shit. You could follow enough. Don't get too much details. Everything explained to you. Just enough to drop a quick expo dump, and then she fulfills the arc at the end. That's it. I suppose they could have filled this up a little better, maybe. As I say, somebody made the point. I forget who it is. Made the point that it's like 4 arcs fit into 3 arcs, right? It's 4 arcs worth of material, 4 acts worth of material into 3 acts. Yeah, kind of. That's how I kind of think about it. It feels a bit like that. It just felt a little chopped in, a little chopped up. But to me, it was mostly like stuff that would have get chopped anyway, like the downtime, and again the stuff with Ben and I forget Natasha Lyonne's character, the teacher. I felt they could have done a little more with some of that, but that was about it. Yeah, I enjoyed this. I had a lot of fun with this one. It just looked good. It looked great.
Yeah.
Action was good. I dug the story, and then the lead up, and then the 2 post-credit scenes are solid stuff.
Yes.
It's typical Marvel shit. Again, if I was younger, I would be like bawling and say, finally. But
Yeah.
it's like they kind of sell this out in a Comic Con last 2 years or whatever it was. So it's like I
Yeah,
don't, yeah,
exactly. Right. So I just want to
yeah,
mention a few things, and then we wrap up, right? So yeah, I mean the just the retro aesthetic of this world, I absolutely love.
yeah,
Though I love how detailed everything is because it's not just
yeah.
buildings, right? It's not just billboards or whatnot, right? Or posters. There was one poster that I couldn't help but think of, right? It's for a movie, right? Is something about. All right, so I'll put it like this, right? I was thinking I Station Zebra, which is a movie that
Okay.
came out in 1968. But for what I read online, this movie is set in 1960, like exact 60, right? Because yeah, I was watching certain like visual cues, and there will be like instances of TV shows or talk shows or whatnot, right? I was trying to piece together what year in the 60s is this at, right? But that's just you. That just me. That would just be me overthinking things, right? I don't think the point is just to be like, what year is this? Is it 1965 or whatever it is? It's just it's in the 60s, right? But I didn't think it was 1960 per se, right? But anyway, the world of New York here looks fantastic in my opinion, right? I think that as far as production design, this shit needs to get an Oscar nomination, Trent. Just offer production design alone, Trent, right? The detail of it, even right down to the very 2001-esque architecture, right? The chairs and whatnot, right? Very Kubrick inspired, right? I love that, right? I just how the world looks, no, sorry, just how it feels, right? Okay, seeing like, ABC, and you see talk shows, and how you mentioned that talk show host, like just everything about it feels like you're watching something from the 60s, right? And I love how the music, Michael Giacchino's music reflects that, right? Even with its
Yes.
over the top flourishes or whatnot, it feels very much like you're watching a 60s show, right? Um, Somebody make the reference how it feels like you're watching an episode of an old TV series. Yeah, I love that. That's actually a great point. It really does feel, in retrospect, like you are watching, an episode of an old series, right? And it absolutely works too. I was actually surprised that of the leads who play the Fantastic Four. Pedro Pascal. At first I wasn't too big on him being Reed Richards, but he actually
Right.
works, right? I like that he plays him as his
Yeah.
own character, but it's my boy Eamon Moss Backrack though. His depiction of the thing absolutely works, right? And the mere fact that they are celebrities, they are well known in this world here. I like that so in this case, you don't have to spend too much time with them feeling dour about their powers. Like, oh my god, I could
Right.
stretch. Oh no, it's like the world knows what they could do, right? So you don't have to worry about that. I love that it is about the family dynamic, even right now to having this one robot. I forgot the character's name, but it works there.
Herbie.
Herbie, yeah, yeah, yeah. So it gives it that sort of Jetsons kind of feel to it. It absolutely works too.
Yeah.
The whole conceit of it, involving, yes, Sue being pregnant and eventually giving birth, and how Franklin, that would be the child, how his role is, well, the bigger role he plays later on, absolutely works for me, right? I mean, yes, well, there's a moment involving the child that got some laughs from the audience, but those were from more Gen Zers, basically. Just basically, I don't know. Like I knew it was coming, but maybe it's because he just found it to be kind of cheesy or corny. Maybe that's why they laugh. But I was like, no, this is really genuine and sweet, though, and very, very affectionate. I love that, even though yes, he knew what was going to happen anyway, right? And I do like the depiction of Galactus. Easily the best depiction of Galactus we ever gotten. In terms of just the look and the feel of it, right? But yes, like you, I felt they could have done more with him in the third act. Just him kind of being, and I get it, right? They go in for kaiju, right? They want to do the kaiju thing, right? But even with, all right, so like, without spoiling it, right? Given the context of what's going on in the city itself, right? He still should have posed a bigger threat. That's the best way I could sum it up. It just sort of felt like he wasn't that big of a threat. And it was just him going towards a particular thing. And then it was just the Fantastic Four just there to stop it. But I just felt like he could have posed a bigger threat, right? That's what it is, right?
Right.
And also, this is not a nitpick, but I know it will be for some people. I like the tech in it, right? The sci-fi ness of it all, right? Yes, it is very over the top. It is very ridiculous. It is very silly, but it kind of taps back into stuff that we've seen in other Fantastic Four films. In particular, slight spoiler: the idea of taking an item and using some sci-fi device to pretty much dematerialize it and then send it to another place. That
Yeah.
has been done in Fan Four Stick, and they actually did that very well here, right?
Right.
So I like that the show sort of subconsciously takes bits and
Yeah. The
pieces
plot
of the
line.
old shows of the other
Yeah.
Fantastic Four films and just sort of
Right.
tweak them in a
Much like yeah,
smarter way. Just like Superman.
much like yeah, that's like Superman, right? Exactly. But it's also like borrow like a bunch of like classic sci-fi shit, like oh, we're gonna do this insane bullshit. Like somebody point out it was my episode of SpongeBob. I remember seeing some TikTok with that. But I was thinking of there's an episode of Stargate that does this. So it's like okay, we gotta move Earth or they phase Earth in some way. So it's a big silly idea, and then it gets interrupted and they figure it out. I like it's a solid enough, like again, very phase one kind of plot. And
Yeah,
that's why it felt like I don't think this is like a reset or fixing anything, but this is a really good like pace to build off of going forward. Like we're gonna get, I think it's just this, and then Spider Man, and then what do you call it, Doomsday, and that is like really smart what Marvel is doing. Marvel is very smart in doing it like that because with Spider Man we're gonna get some shit. Right, Spider Man's always make money. Spider Man gonna be some like what Deadpool and Wolverine is going to do something to just ease you up and bring in the nostalgia, but also make the money. Even though I sure the script going to be a complete mess, right? And then Doomsday, and I sure the script going to be a mess in that, but it going to just do what Deadpool and Wolverine is from a money making standpoint, and just lead into that last set of nostalgia, squeeze the last nostalgia juice before they do whatever they had to do. But I thought this was excellent. This was really, really good. A good space to build from. I
it
don't have any
was.
major
Yeah,
issues with this. And yeah, I glad it is as it is.
yeah.
I will making some smart moves, really
Yeah,
smart moves.
they are right. Just a couple more things. I thought that the direction was strong. From Matt.
Yeah,
Shortcut is his name is
yeah.
no Shortcut or Showman.
That's right. I'm trying to remember what he did before this. It's slipping my mind
I
now. I'm
have
trying
to
to
I
remember
have
like
to look that up too, because I'm not
where
familiar with his work, right? But yeah,
yeah,
I thought he did a great job directing wise, especially directing the action in particular. That one scene that
yeah,
you mentioned before, the black hole, yes, will go down as one of the best scenes I've seen theatrically all year. Sound
yeah,
design, great, of course. Music, solid, of course. From Michael Giacchino. But it's just really the sort of sentimental nature of it, the optimistic vibe of it, that's really the sell of it, right? Just like Superman, right? There's an earnestness to everything.
yeah.
There's nothing cynical about it. Even when things
Yeah,
get really
exactly.
weird and silly, it's like that's kind of the point. Is that we all will look to these characters to come and save us, no matter
Yeah,
what
and
crazy
I
thing they
thought.
do. That's what they're gonna do. Cause the Fantastic Four. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I thought it was going. I thought the show was going to drop with that. Like, oh, this, usually if you have some kind of hypothetical, like virtual, but not full utopia, but borderline utopia. Like, oh, some dark secret at the bottom of it, or something like that. I thought he was gonna flip the script on that, and like, no, it's really that positive. Like, they're really pulling it off. Like, I like, all right, great. They didn't they didn't flip that or anything like that. It's like, oh, I can live with that. That was good. I got like we gonna well in Thunderbolts now they're gonna show up and they're gonna get to that point and see how we're gonna get to Doomsday. But yeah, I dug the hell out of this. I'm rating. Yeah, I get it's like an 8 out of 10. Solid outing. Didn't like it as much as Superman, but still a really really solid outing as it was. Mostly because it falters slightly because it feels a little too yesterday's homework as it is, and a little nitpicks in terms of how the plot should pace itself out. But that's about it. Yeah, I dug this one.
Yeah, so given the amount of stuff that we talked about over the past like hour or so, I'm gonna just keep this short and sweet. This gets a strong 4 to a very light 4.5 out of 5. This is easily one of the best films of the year. Definitely check out the Fantastic Four, First Steps. We finally got it right. No mind it took us 3 decades to get to this point. But hey, here we are, right? Here we are. I should say 31, right? Yeah, 31 years. But yeah, they finally did it. And yeah, this is a great movie. I definitely need to check this out again in big screen, hopefully. And I would say if you haven't already, please check this out on big screen. This is definitely worth your time and money. Easily one of the best films of the year so far.